Listeners, thanks for tuning in to another Discussions with Dow. This is the Low Dow, where I speak one-to-one with a guest. We talk life, motivation, and success. Specifically, we're going to talk about a cause, one that's very close to my heart. I was very lucky enough through my hobby of reading Cosmo magazine. There was an article in here, Make Your Cause Your Career, and one that stood out to me very much was No More Tears, started by a former Pakistani actress, Somy Ali. I have her on the show right here. Somy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
I try to be careful like saying this because I think people who actually help out in the nonprofit field don't like this story. But one of my biggest exposures to human trafficking was the movie Taken. It was a very fantasy-esque movie, that revenge plot right there. But a lot of people didn't know that the actress in there who played the mother, Famke Jensen, she became an ambassador and really pushed awareness on that through the Polaris Project.
Correct.
I wanted to check with you, Somy. How, you were featured in the Cosmo article, Make Your Cause Your Career. Why is this issue so close to your heart?
Well, it's a long story, but I grew up in Pakistan, of course. I was born there, and I saw a lot of abuse in my household. And also all my mom's friends would come over. I would always see bruises on their faces, or one of them would have a broken elbow or something. There was always something wrong. I was, of course, 4 years at the time, 4 years old. And I would just ask my mom, like, what happened? And to Auntie so-and-so, and she would be like, oh, she fell down the stairs. And then as an adult, I realized that that's a euphemism for abuse. And it's a universal euphemism for abuse. So I think having grown up in so much violence, and then, of course, living in India for 9 years and seeing a lot of abuse there as well, I just wanted to do something where I could help men, women, and children after finishing college. And that's why I started No More Tears. Now, initially, we started No More Tears with a focus on domestic violence. However, since we're working with immigrants, a lot of women that are brought here and then they're victims of domestic violence or rape or sexual violence, I think human trafficking is somewhat intertwined with domestic violence. You can't separate one from the other, especially when we're working with immigrants. So we just decided to implement that, and we partnered with the FBI in Palm Beach as well as in Miami, and decided to do something about it.
You were talking about how, we have these code words of someone fell down the stairs, and, we hear that, and it's not till time progresses that we're really aware of what that means. And that's been a part of your life. You've been exposed to that, but abuse is something that you're almost too familiar with. You've had an instance where very personally where it happened. I don't know how much detail you want to go in about that.
Yeah, so I like I said, I grew up in Pakistan till I was 12, and we had a house help in our house. And when I was 4 years old, I was sexually abused by him, and it happened again when I was 9. And what I went through when I went to my parents, my father and my mother were furious. But one thing that they told me is that to never tell anyone that this happened to you. And as a child at 4 years of age, I, for some reason, thought that I was responsible for it. And that kind of it was cemented in my mind. And I want every family, every culture to please, I urge them and request them that if your child is sexually abused, do not tell them that, because it really, really impacts them in a negative manner. And they feel like they're the victims. So please, please talk to your children about sexual abuse. And if they are unfortunately a victim of sexual abuse, do not tell them that they should hide it or that it's their fault or no one can know, because it's not their fault. They're the victims.
I imagine it's an unfortunate crossover of guilt that the parents must have felt.
There is guilt, of course, because my parents probably felt bad and responsible where they were not able to catch that, or they were not able to intervene when that was happening, because it happened on 3 occasions when I was 4, and then again twice when I was 9 years old, and it all happened in Pakistan. And it was, again, the house help. And I think that outside of feeling sorry and angry, and they were also worried about saving face. That's another huge aspect of our culture. And that's not fair to the children. That's not fair to anyone that's been sexually abused. I think they need love and comfort, and they need to be repeatedly told that it wasn't their fault and they're the victims. And I think that mindset in our society, not just where I come from, but in a lot of societies, that mindset needs to be changed. And we need to do more about it. We need to speak up more about it and do something about it, because sexual abuse of children is universal. It's in every culture. It's highly prevalent. And unless we speak up and we stop victim blaming, it's going to have traumatic effects on the child and also as an adult, because it happened when I was a kid, but I'm still not able to heal from it. I'm able to function, but there are moments that I think about it, and it left a huge, huge mark on my psyche.
The date that No More Tears started was in 2006, is that correct?
November 2006 is when it was registered, and the first victim that we rescued was in 2008.
Now, getting that off the ground and getting it running, because the interesting thing about No More Tears is nobody takes a salary.
No.
It's all volunteer, interns there.
Mm-hmm.
You survive off of donations, but especially in those early years, how did that work?
Well, I had $300,000 of my savings, which I kind of used in No More Tears initially to get it off of its feet. And once those depleted in 2011, we became significantly reliant on private donors.
What's the day-to-day operation look like now compared to back then? I imagine, back then a much smaller team of individuals. Again, not official staff, but the group of volunteers and interns that you have, what does that look like now?
So we work with a lot of universities and high schools, and they send kids that are required to take community service hours before they graduate. And so we had interns all the time. However, we also had an office 2 years ago, which shut down because one of our interns and I were sitting in the office and an abuser showed up with a gun. And he literally pointed it at us, and he said that this is a warning and next time you're going to be dead, and he walked out. So the board of directors and myself decided it's not safe for me to be in an office space. Because you can't separate the fact when you do this kind of work, social work, that's going to happen. You're going to face dangers, and your life is going to be at risk inevitably. So we shut down the office, and now I pretty much work from home. We have a list of resources from attorneys, family law attorneys, immigration attorneys, therapists, driving lessons, nursing schools, education, job training. All of those resources are intact. So when I get a referral, or if I have to go meet with a victim at a police department, we simply just refer them to our resources, our service providers.
With that pool of resources that you have, were those people always real willing to be supportive, or did it take some time to warm up? Do you have any resistance when you try to ask people to lend their hand?
It was a year. I knocked on many doors. I went to immigration attorneys, private attorneys, family law attorneys, therapists, because I didn't want to put anyone on a waiting list. I wanted to run No More Tears differently than other nonprofits. And a lot of the other nonprofits, the bigger nonprofits, have a waiting list. And not to undermine their work, I think they do phenomenal work. But I wanted No More Tears to be run in a very different model. And so I contacted these private attorneys and these therapists and doctors. And a lot of them, when I told them, I said, look, I'll give you a discounted rate, because if you want them to do something pro bono, they'll talk to you once and they'll help you once. And then next time they didn't want to answer my phone call. So
Right.
it took me a while, and I was fortunate enough, it took me a year, but I was able to accumulate excellent people that are our service providers now. And they do our work for a very discounted rate.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
and they prioritize the victims. So it's excellent.
and I imagine like that's just going to compound each year, like the more you guys progress. And 2006, 2008, where we're talking about, that's getting to that point where it's a decade ago.
Yes, exactly.
I want to touch back on what you mentioned with making sure you're not in the office anymore, because that's only briefly touched on in that Cosmo article, where you've received death threats. You've had people slash your tires. It didn't mention in the article, but you just said here you had a gun in your face. How do you handle that that stress right there? Managing fear, pushing forward. Not only having to worry and take care of other people's lives, but having to have that concern for yourself as well.
I'm extra vigilant, of course. I try to avoid being in a parking lot at night by myself. I carry mace. I've had lots of emails where the abusers will call and give me, or email me and give me death threats and say that they're going to kill me. And I have to change my cell phone number every 6 months, because once they find it, they keep calling me, and then they just use profanities and threaten me. So I have realized that when you do social work, this is something that's inevitable. You cannot separate the fact that your life is at risk when you do this kind of work, because we're dealing with people that are not right in their head. We're dealing with drug abusers, alcoholics. We're dealing with people that are sadistic, and anything can happen. But once I decided I wanted to do this, nothing was going to hold me back.
That's amazing. And, power to you, because, whether it's domestic violence, human trafficking, whatever cause that resonates with people, I think there's a will to pitch in. There's care in a lot of people, but once you get in the trenches of it and you have that facing you, a lot of it dissipates, a lot of it fades away. I think one of the things that I want to talk with you about is we're in this day and age where there's a lot of passive activism. One of the things that bothers me a lot is what you see on, let's say, Facebook.
Right.
Change your picture, share an article. And yes, awareness is incredibly important. I don't want to diminish that, but do you get frustrated by that? Do you ever wish like people should be doing more?
Absolutely. I think what I've learned in the past 9 years of doing this work is that I've sensed a lot of victim blaming. I've seen a lot of victim blaming. I think this mission has been very, very hard to sell. I think people are reluctant because a lot of people are unable to understand what goes on with a domestic violence victim. I think they're quick to judge, and they feel like, well, why can't you just leave? Now, yes. There are there are several reasons why a victim of domestic violence can't leave. They don't have financial support. They don't have social support. They're brought here from different countries. They don't know where they are geographically if they were to walk out of their house. They're dependent on the abuser who's supporting them. They've given birth to children in the U.S., and if they're undocumented, the abusers will threaten them of having them deported, and they're afraid of losing their children. So there's so many aspects of why a victim is afraid to speak up and walk out. And I think our society as a whole needs to get educated about these reasons and be a little more involved and speak up and donate to organizations that do help domestic violence victims and human trafficking victims.
I'm going to go ahead and jump to a fan question here, because this touches on exactly what you were talking about right there. This comes from Valerie. how can we help people who are afraid to reach out for help?
Oh, there's so many things that you can do. I mean, for example, No More Tears, how we get our referrals is I take brochures, our literature, and I put it in mosques, in temples, in churches, grocery stores, because no matter how abused you are, the abuser is going to expect you to cook and clean. So a woman will go to the grocery store, and we have placed palm cards in different languages, which have our crisis line number. So I would encourage people to get that literature and give it to someone that they suspect is going through a domestic violence situation. Give them that option, talk to them, support them, and help them. Tell them that there is help out there. There are many organizations that provide numerous services, including No More Tears. We have to make victims aware that there are resources for them to get help, and they do not need to be afraid and do not need to be stuck in this situation.
And I like that a lot because, again, it's that knowledge that you have options.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is going to be different from online campaigns where you can have a beautiful website, you can package a beautiful video together, it can get thousands of likes and shares, but the victim right there that's in that situation, they might not have access to that. And you're talking about going through channels where that person's going to see it on a daily basis. They can have something in their hand. And
Mm-hmm.
I think having something tangible is very empowering.
Absolutely. I got a crisis call yesterday from a woman that was brought here from Hungary. And she is in an abusive situation. And she did not have any knowledge or of any resources. She was terrified. She was crying. She said, I don't know. I don't even know how to go to a shelter. I don't know what my rights are. And there are a lot of these victims that are just clueless. They don't know where to go, what to do, how to get help, and they're terrified. And in many instances, with the immigrant women that we've been helping, they don't get the support back home either from their families, because in certain cultures they're told that, look, you have to make it work. You're married and you have to make it work.
And here's another fan question that comes from Anne that touches on that very point. How do you help those people draw the line when it comes to cultural roles? How do you teach them that this is abuse? This is not just submissive duty that you've been taught.
Well, it's easier for me to convey that to the victims and make them understand that you do not deserve this. You do not have to go through this. And any culture that preaches violence or tells you it's okay to be abused is not right. And I have had a tougher time dealing with the parents back home that tell their daughters that it's okay what you're going through. You're married and you're supposed to listen to your husband, irrespective of how he treats you. So I've had better luck with the victims in getting them out and explaining to them that they don't need to go through this, rather than the families back home.
Do you work primarily on the East Coast? I mean, is your reach throughout the US? Do you ever go overseas to try to help the victims if they're stuck in dealing with those family relations?
Not back home. No, we can't go back. We don't have the resources. We're a small nonprofit. We're perpetually struggling for funding. Like I said, it's a hard mission to sell. And, unfortunately, not to undermine the abuse of animals, but it's easier to get money for abused animals because you can show the animals that are abused. In No More Tears' case, we can't reveal the victims. We can't exploit them. We can't show their faces. We can tell their stories. Many of the victims are reluctant to speak to the media or to get their story out, justifiably so. Many of them are embarrassed because there's a stigma attached to being abused. So it's really, really difficult.
This is another good question from Anne, where do you have cases where men are abused too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We also work with the LGBT community. There's a lot of domestic violence there. So, and then we've also had heterosexual men that have been abused that have come to us. So we help everyone, men, women, children, Like I said, we work with the LGBT community as well. So wherever there's violence, sexual, physical, or verbal abuse, we intervene and help.
Do you find any segment more difficult to handle than the rest, or is each one just an individual case?
I think I've had issues with the South Asian culture and the Middle Eastern culture because the upbringing and that, of course, my upbringing was quite strict as well when I was growing up in Pakistan, where the mindset is that it's okay what you go through, and this is a woman's role, and this is how it works in the culture. So that takes a lot of hard work to try and explain to these women and these young girls that, this is not right. And no matter what the culture says, this is completely unacceptable. So I've had issues. It's been really, really tough to deal with that part of the culture and that part of the world. Victims that come from the Middle East and Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So that's been a little frustrating.
Right. And I have a couple questions kind of around that, but I don't know if you would be able to answer them. It's just, do you see people from those groups who tried actively to kind of stunt the support that you're able to get? Let's say you do a fundraiser or a drive, and then you have those people who are trying to defame you, trying to slander you, trying to say that you're disrespectful of the culture, like trying to warp the image of what you're doing.
Absolutely. I'm not very popular within my culture because I'm doing something very, very unconventional. I'm in accordance to a lot of my extended family. I should have been married with 4 kids by now. And what I do is very, very difficult for them to digest. So I've faced a lot of obstacles from within some extended family members. And of course, then there's also my father, who's very fearful of my life. He worries about putting myself in danger. But he's come to terms with it, and he's actually very proud of me. So it took a while, but I convinced him.
There's other people that I've podcasted with before, and they don't always get it. Mm-hmm. But to have that moment finally where it clicks with the parents and you get that kind of support, I imagine that has to be very rewarding right there.
It is. It is, absolutely.
How do you handle instances where there's clearly abuse going on, but that person rejects any kind of help whatsoever?
There's nothing we can do when that happens, because we really have limited resources. We have limited funds. And when the victim is not ready, my hands are tied. There's nothing I can do. So I will talk with them. I will give them their options. I will give them advice. I will let them go meet with our family law attorney, our immigration attorney, so they know their options. But it has to come from them. Unless the victim is ready to take that step and to leave, unfortunately, our hands are tied. We can't force them to leave.
Taking a step back from specifically this cause, but talking about nonprofits in general, mm-hmm. What sort of advice would you give to other people who are passionate about something and want to make it into their own, just as you have done?
I would highly recommend to intern or volunteer your time at a 501c3 nonprofit prior to starting your own, because you need to learn. It's a very, very, very difficult thing to run an organization. There are many obstacles. It's very, very, the biggest obstacle for us has been to get funds. So I would highly recommend interning or volunteering at other nonprofits to learn how it's done. And then you can kind of extrapolate from your experiences there and see how you want to run your own nonprofit.
Looking back at where No More Tears has come from, is there anything you would have done differently? Anything you would have changed from the beginning, make things easier for yourself, or something that you missed out on entirely?
No. I'm very happy with how we run the model. I'm happy that it's run like a family. It's very family oriented. We have baby showers, birthday parties for the victims and their children. We treat them like human beings. We treat them like family. These people have been abused verbally, physically, sexually. What they need is love and support. It's amazing what these people amount up to just with a little bit of support and guidance and love. It's unbelievable.
All right. Well, Somi, if people want to reach out and connect and help No More Tears, how can they get in contact?
Well, they can go to nmtproject.org, which is NMT stands for No More Tears, project is singular.org, and email us, get involved. We have a volunteer form online. They can donate via our website. We also encourage people to sign up monthly just for $10. That adds up, and we need financial support very, very badly, and I would be very happy if people would take just a few minutes out of their time to at least become a monthly donor. That would really help us.
Was there anything that you wanted to air out? Was there any kind of issue, any other point that we weren't able to touch on just through that conversation that you really want people to know? Anything that we missed?
I would encourage people to educate themselves about what a domestic violence victim goes through. I want them to learn the obstacles and the hurdles for them, why they cannot leave. Because typically I hear a lot, well, why couldn't she just leave? And I've heard this sometimes from police officers.
Yes.
And it's very, very unfortunate because people really need to get educated on how big and prevalent this issue is. And they need to really do something. I mean, just take one cause. It doesn't have to be No More Tears, but I think that in my life, I've realized that if you're a little blessed, it's your duty to do something and give back to the society.